We are in Hollywood, Florida for the occasion of the grand opening of the Church of Perpetual Life. Inspired by the concepts of Prophet Nikolai Fedorovich Fedorov, the Creator's plan is for mankind to develop technologies that will facilitate the transformation of life into an environment of perpetual duration. The Life Extension Foundation has long believed its members and friends would like an institution that leads people to bond and feel that they are part of an important group of efforts. And that's exactly what the Life Extension Foundation hopes to achieve with the Church of Perpetual Life, and of course to defeat aging and disease. This new church is here to celebrate life, and we will learn more following these messages.
I read Life Extension magazine to keep abreast of medical discoveries that can literally save my life. Life Extension's track record dating back to 1980 shows they are decades ahead of conventional medicine in identifying proven methods to prevent and treat the diseases of aging. Reading Life Extension magazine will empower you to take control over your health and longevity. And as a special favor to me, the Life Extension Foundation will give a free 1-year subscription to anyone today. Just call the number on this screen to obtain your free Life Extension subscription. There's no cost, no obligation, just the opportunity to discover solid options to live longer and better. Call the number on the screen today to start receiving Life Extension magazine each month.
Take charge of your health. Get your free subscription to Life Extension magazine now by calling toll-free 1-800-509-9117 or visit www.lef.org.
Thanks for coming and welcome to our first service, if you will, here at the Church of Perpetual Life. My name is Neil Vandery, and it's my great pleasure and honor to be your minister and officiator here. And our church, this church, the Church of Perpetual Life, is a non-denominational church. It's our belief here and our expectations and hopes that we will realize our goal, and that goal is to find ways to radically extend healthy human life. We feel it's our obligation to create a heaven here on earth together to make this planet a paradise. With all of these things in mind, it's our hope to find ways to extend healthy human living. And I'm glad that you're all here to meet with us here tonight. It's our expectation to have meetings similar to this and to have other great speakers throughout the year to come and make their presentations and to talk about different aspects of these goals. It's my pleasure to introduce to you tonight a great man whose vision and life's mission is parallel to that of this church. His organization has over 100,000 members and publishes a magazine with a circulation of over 300,000. He has been featured in hundreds of media appearances, such as The Phil Donahue Show, The Joan Rivers Show, ABC News Day One, and in the Newsweek magazine, just to name a few. So let's give a healthy and hearty welcome to our speaker this evening, Mr. Bill Falloon.
Thank you so much, Neil. You know, there's an aspect of humanity that is so self-evident that it does not require an explanation. This self-evident aspect of humanity does not need to be justified, and it certainly does not require any kind of societal vindication. No one can rationally argue that illness is preferable to good health. No one can rationally argue that involuntary death is preferable to vibrant life. An increasing number of people are refusing to accept the concept of involuntary death. These individuals are rebelling against the societal and scientific inertia that is robbing us of our youth, our health, and our very existence. Now, human beings, unfortunately, have a flaw. This flaw enables them to accept the most abhorrent traditions. Abhorrent traditions such as degenerative disease, aging, and death as something that's inevitable and therefore necessary, merely because that's the way it's always happened. Now, the founders of the Church of Perpetual Life recognize that people erect psychological barriers against the acceptance of new ideas. Not only do people have difficulty understanding the societal value to a radical novel technology, but they conjure up all kinds of imaginary, cynical scenarios where they somehow think that a major breakthrough, a major technological advance will create a problem, simply because it's going to change the way things have always been. We like to use analogies to try to explain our position, to validate our position. And one easy analogy to talk about is how skeptics looked at train travel. The fear was if human beings traveled at a rate of speed that was too fast, they would suffocate. And as locomotives continued traveling faster and faster, and people walked out of those locomotives alive, still breathing, well, that whole theory was disproven, and it fell by the wayside. Now, we believe that in the future, people are going to look at the degenerative diseases that we suffer with today, the so-called inevitable aging process, the involuntary death. They're going to look at that as a relic, something that they're grateful that they don't have to contend with, because we, hopefully in this society, this generation, took some initial steps to stop it. The Church of Perpetual Life has been established to fill a modern-day gap. The church will unite like-minded individuals. We're going to teach scientific rationality and accelerate the Creator's plan for mankind to develop technologies that will facilitate the transformation of life into an environment of perpetual duration. A founding tenet of this church is that indefinitely extended, healthy human lifespans are not only desirable, and I'd hate to think that anyone would argue against that concept, that indefinitely extended, healthy human lifespans are not desirable. We see them as being utopia. But they're also attainable. Indefinitely extended human lifespans are attainable. And they're what the Creator intended for mankind to accomplish. Now, on the screen, you can see on each side of me there, you see a picture of a book. It's a rather rare book right now. It was written about a prophet named Nikolai Fedorov. The name of the book is What Was Man Created For? And according to the prophet Fedorov, man was created to achieve the common goal of humanity, which is to develop technologies that will result in universal salvation. Those books, by the way, are very hard to come by. If you go onto eBay, they cost about $3,000. We're hoping to obtain the publication rights, so we'll have them sitting in all the pews in your future visits here, and that everyone can have a copy of them. Because Fedorov truly was a prophet. And in his time in Russia, famine was a major concern. If the harvest did not yield enough food, people went hungry. People starved. And Fedorov didn't understand why mankind wasn't devoting more technology to figuring out how to more productively grow food. He said it was possible. And unfortunately, in his era, mankind was more involved in war, discord, sloth. He viewed it as sinful that mankind did not devote more energies to resolving the problems that were creating unnecessary death. So we're going to talk a little bit about Fedorov's doctrines during this presentation, and we're going to talk about some modern science, and we're going to see how these merge together. And I want to thank people, by the way, for showing up tonight. I know you had a lot of other activities you could have been engaged in. I mean, there are bowling alleys out there. There's movie theaters. You could have been sitting in front of your TV or in a loud nightclub, or maybe just glued to your computer screen. But what we're trying to do is bring people together to create a common cause so that we can develop and accelerate the technologies that we know inevitably will occur, but we'd like to see them occur in our generation. So what I'm going to do tonight is show you something that's never been displayed in public before. First time you're going to see something. We're going to flip right now to the second screen here. What you're looking at is a brain of a 45-year-old woman. She's alive, by the way. This is a SPECT scan. This measures metabolic activity. And what you're going to see in this brain is areas where there's very little metabolic activity occurring. You see these two little holes right here? Those are areas where there's very little blood circulation, very little cellular metabolic activity. This is the top of her brain. It should be all filled in, by the way, but what you see here is a cavern. This is areas where her brain is not functioning very well. And then we go to the base of her brain. It's even worse. We see these very large gaps in areas that should be filled with blood flow, that should be brewing with metabolic activity. Instead, they're empty. The structure's still there, by the way. There's just no metabolic activity to speak of. And right here at the base of her brain, this gulf here, this huge area should be filled up with healthy metabolic activity. It's empty. Now, this woman had a debilitating chronic fatigue syndrome. She was not able to function either in work or in play or anything else. She went to an innovative doctor, and at the end of this presentation, I'm going to show you what happened after 2 months of an innovative therapy being initiated. We, by the way, are investigating this therapy as a way to potentially reverse the aging process systemically in human beings today. This is something that might be available very soon today for us to reverse large aspects of aging, not just in the brain, but in our vascular systems, our livers, our kidneys, and I'm going to explain that as we go through this presentation. We have to enlighten the public as to how far we have come from a technological standpoint over the last 100 years. Because people just don't remember how short lifespans used to be. In 1900, people lived to be about 47 years of age on average. Now that's a little misleading because the infant mortality rate was quite high back then, so that skewed the numbers downward a bit. But we've looked at a lot of documentation. We've studied a lot of history, and people, for the most part, if they made it into their 30s or 40s, they were very unhealthy. And some of the unhealthy aspects of their life that you might imagine is an ingrown toenail. Doctors didn't always know how to deal with that. So people simply walked around in pain. They did figure out how to do that around the year 1860. But around 1900, they still were trying to figure out what caused appendicitis. Some doctors knew. If you went to the right doctor, he would remove the right organ. If you went to the wrong doctor, he wouldn't be able to effectively treat that disease, and you would die a horrifically painful, agonizing type of a situation in which fever and eventually peritonitis would kill you. But you look at today, we're living much longer. That's only over a period of 100 years. 1900, very low life expectancy. And there's a lot of young people in this group, so I can't say we all wouldn't be here, but a lot of us, on average, wouldn't be alive right now in 1900. And here we are thinking we expect to live a lot longer. And you look at women, they didn't live past the age of 50 for the most part. I mean, they were dying of all kinds of illnesses that today are treatable. And today, of course, most women do live beyond 50. They live beyond 50 in a reasonable state of health. We sometimes forget what killed people in the past. It wasn't the strokes and cancer and heart disease that plagues us today. It was microorganisms, bacteria, viruses that people weren't even sure in 1900 really existed. And yet that's what was killing the public. Diseases that we now have a treatment for. Those aren't killing the bulk of the population anymore. Those aren't concerns in modern society right now, and yet that's what was killing people just 100 years ago. We've since cured that. 1946 is when antibiotics were available on a mass scale. And yet antibiotics, the concept was discovered and published in 1928 by Alexander Fleming. He made a fortuitous discovery that a certain mold would kill bacteria without injuring healthy cells. And Fleming is credited, by the way, for that discovery. It was actually discovered somewhat before him, and it wasn't paid attention to. It was ignored. And can you imagine how many human beings were needlessly dying when an effective therapy already existed to cure them? And you think of the parents of the children who were dying right before their eyes, and yet in a published medical journal was information about a mold that when put into a human being could eradicate the bacteria. Well, the same situation occurs today. We have people needlessly dying of aging processes that are treatable, that are controllable, and in some cases reversible. And yet these individuals are needlessly dying right before our eyes, just like they were doing in the early 1900s from infectious diseases when effective therapies were already substantiated in peer-reviewed scientific publications. This little pie chart was created just to try to emphasize how long recorded human history goes back and what a little slither is represented over the last 113 years. And what has happened over the last 113 years is far more technological advance than happened in the entire spectrum of the previous period. You go to 8000 BC to 1899, and progress was relatively trivial. I mean, the mistakes that were made, the ignorance that existed before 1900 was ridiculous. And look at what we've accomplished in that little slither, that little red spot. That indicates where we are over the last 113 years. Now just imagine 100 years from now, when there's an even tinier slither, the accelerated technological progress that's going to result in the eradication of the degenerative diseases that we know today, the aging processes that we're suffering with, and these involuntary deaths that are so tragic. When we live, the period of time of when we live dictates how long we will live. And if you realize when this country was founded, the founding fathers, by the way, pretty much all suffered from a number of medical conditions. There was a book published recently called Revolutionary Medicine, and it described all of the health ailments of our founding fathers. And we thought that the founding fathers were vibrant, energetic people, and they were, but they suffered. And they also didn't live very long. At least the average person in 1800, 36 years of age. And in the last 200 years, we've been able to double that. In a period where there wasn't always a lot of technological advancement occurring, we've been able to double that. So to me, that tells you a lot, that when you're around dictates how long you're going to live. And where you live, that has an effect as to how long you're going to live. In other countries, people are living somewhat longer than they are in the United States. And what we're going to try to teach here at this church are what other people are doing in other countries or just other parts of this country that we're not aware of, that's enabling them to live longer. So we see in the United States, people are living to be around 79 years of age, which is a big improvement, but some other countries, they're living longer. They're obviously doing something different, because when these people move to the United States, they die at the average age of people in our country. So it's not their genetic predisposition that's giving them that longevity. It's where they live and their culture, their health habits. But to go at the other end of the spectrum, if we decided to move somewhere else and adopt the standards of these other countries, we go back to where we were in 1900. These are primarily countries in Africa, and these people don't live very long at all. This would be totally unacceptable to us today, and yet this is what people in these other countries are suffering through. So where we live and when we live, that really determines how long we're going to live.